Gemara today, Monday's Gemara is Daf Ayin Hey. We are up to the bottom of the page, 4 lines from the bottom. Continuation about how to kasha different utensils and or other kalim that were used for producing grapes. And the problem is yain nesach tamyenim. How do you kasha them? So the Gemara continues. Amar Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda said, Hani revoket amoy. These sacks from amoy that they used to place the leftover grapes in there, and then they would try to extract the residual wine that was retained in those grapes. So obviously there was some wine that oozed out over there, and depending on the material that this sack is made of, that's the kind of kashing you make. So the mazia, human hair, which hardly absorbs madichin, you just rinse it out. The amra, if it's wool, which absorbs more menagvan, you have to use the method of drying which we learned before. It's ashes and water, depending if it's the order of how to do it. We learned it yesterday. The kisna linen miyashlan, you have to wait the 12 months that we learned. By then the taste is completely faded away and it's gone. The ika katri, and if there are any ropes over there, so there could be wine trapped in the knot of the ropes, then shadilu, you have to open the knot. Hani dikuli, these baskets, v'chalosa, and this sieve that's shaped like a kiveres, like a beehive. The armai from these nations of Amoi. The chiti, if they were woven together, the chevle, the tzuri, with ropes from the palm tree, is then it doesn't really absorb madichin. All you have to then do is to rinse it. But if the tzafs is a kind of a natural rubber, then linag, when it absorbs more, you have to dry it. The kisna, if it's a linen, then miyashlan, the same thing again, you have to leave it age. The kitre, and if there's any knots over there, then shadilu, you have to untie it so that the wine can escape. Itma, we learned am ha'oret shahoishit yoda legas. If an am ha'oret, now we're talking about the laws of tumah. If an am ha'oret stretched out his hand and touched this wine press, the noga be'eshkoilis, he touched the grapes, and we say that all amaratzim are tamei. And these grapes are sitting in the wine, so the Amma Oretz is like an Ava Tumah. We treat the grapes like it's a Rishon L'Tumah. And a Rishon L'Tumah can then touch something else, makes it into a Sheni L'Tumah, but doesn't go beyond that unless it's Truma, which then goes to a Shlishi, and if it's Hegdish, it goes to a Ravi. So we're talking about Chulin, ordinary wine. So he touched the wine press, and V'noga Beshka, he touched the grapes. It's an argument to Rebbe and Abchia. Chadama, one says, Eshkoil, the kol svi voice, the grapes are Tameh, because that's a Rishon, and anything that came in contact with art is Tameh as a Sheni. But the chol hagas kula, but the rest is tahira, because if that sheni then touches beyond that, it's a shlishi, and there's no shlishi, there's no third generation when it comes to ordinary chulin wine or anything else for that matter. The chadam, the other one says kol hagas kula namitmeh, where machmed, the entire gas is tameh, becomes like one unit, and therefore it all becomes a sheni. Says the Gemara Lamandam, the one who says that the eshkol sort of serves as a barrier, and only the chosli voice of it doesn't go any further than that. If other grapes, for example, touch that, you touch the first cluster of grapes, and then this cluster of grapes touch another bunch of grapes, and doesn't go beyond that point. So tell me, how do you explain it? The chosli voice of Tmei, no further, but the gas the rest of the gas Torah. Tell me, Maishna, how is this any different? Mahadit, now we learn sheretz shenimtza b'lechaim. You found a sheretz in a mill that they grind over there olives, and before they put it into the olive press, they grind it over there, and they put a beam on it, and they all the juice oozes out of it. And so there's olive juice there, olive oil. And there it says, sheretz, if you found a sheretz in the Rechayim, the Ein Matam El Makamaga, only where it touched, the immediate area, no further. Bimay mashkin mahalach, but if there was oil flowing, hakol tummy, everything becomes tummy. Everything becomes like one unit. What's the difference? So very simple. Hasam like mifsig midi. There, this liquid that is oozing out of the olives connects everything, and because there's no cluster of olives, each olive is individual, so therefore they all form one unit. Over here, you have this bunch of grapes that's standing in the way. So one thing touches the next, but doesn't go any further than that. So the Rabbanon paskin to Rabbi Yirmiyah, but Amri and others say the braid Rabbi Yirmiyah's son actually, the one who, according to that opinion, that says Eshkol the kol svivois of Tamein, that only the cluster of grapes and all the grapes around there are Tamei, but the chol hagas kula table, the rest of the gas, the rest of the wine press is Torah. Now the next Mishnah talks about kashing. We've been talking about kashing of Avodah Zarah, of yain nesach, now we're going to talk about kashing in algemein, in general. Says the Mishnah. Now we know there are different methods of kashering. One is known as libun. Libun is where you have to torch it and you have to burn it out. Because there is a machlekes in the Achronim, whether based on the words of the Rishonim, whether the libun removes, extricates the flavors completely because it burns right through, penetrates all the way through, or it burns out. That it burns out the taste at all. Not that it exudes anywhere else, it just burns it out. And then not committed to halacha. So that's libun. Then you have, and libun, we're going to see in the Gemara, how far do you have to go before you say this constitutes burning out? Then they have hagala. Hagala is by loaded, filling it up with water, and you're boiling it up, and you have to make sure the water flows over the side. So you put a small pot into a bigger pot. And then the Gemara will discuss if you have a large pot, how do you kasher that? Then we spoke about yesterday about irui. Irui kledisha, where the water flows out of the kledisha and it falls onto something to kasha that. And if the other thing, so we have a general rule when it comes to kasha, which is keteda, or the way keboila kach poltre, the way it absorbed, that's how you extricate it. In other words, if it was cooked, that's keboila, that's how the tray for whatever it is that got absorbed in it. So the same thing, and that's how you exude it the same way, through boiling hot water. If you came in through fire in an oven, let's say in a grill, then you have to use libun to be able to extricate the treif flavor. If it became treif through irui, that you poured water from a clarition of treif that landed on this plate over here, then there's an argument whether we can say that that's how you kasher or not as well, because sometimes you might also use it as a clay rishon, not just as a recipient, not just the irui clay rishon. So how do we look at that? You go after Reif Tashmishay, or even Mia Tashmeh. Sometimes you use it, it's enough to be worried, and therefore we'll say we always need to kasher it in the highest level. Then we also had a concept of kashering, which is irui, which is we had a concept, you soak something and you leave it in the bathtub for 24 hours. You do milu irui, fill it up with cold water, leave it at 24 hours, then you replace the water, and you put it out again and again. And then we know when it comes to a knife, there's a concept of taking the knife and sticking in the ground and 10 times, but that's only good enough to use for cold things, not to use for hot things, or not to use for sharp things, only for cold things. And also not every knife, it depends if it has teeth or doesn't have teeth. Because it has teeth, we're worried about shamnunis, the fats that either got absorbed in it or that is stuck between the teeth. So there are different methods of kashing. But there's another thing called tevilas mikveh. You have to take something and go in the mikveh, which the Gemara here will discuss. There is a big machlekes in the poskim whether when we toivel, immerse our kelim in a mikveh, is that from the Torah or is that from the Rabbanon? Almost everybody says in Torah, but there are some opinions that say even the Rabbanon. And we'll find out that it's not only metal, but a glass also. And there again, we have an argument whether it's Torah Midrabbanon, but there most opinions say it's only Midrabbanon. But other things don't need to be toiveled at all. When it comes to porcelain and these things, there's a machlekes in poskim in China whether it needs to be toiveled or not. So whenever there's an argument and we're machmir and we are toivel it, we don't make a bracha. Like plastic, some people toivel plastic as well. Then you don't make a bracha, but you toivel it. So says the Gemara, says the Mishnah. If somebody buys kalim from a goy, but all you need to do is to, for example, that it was not treif, it was a brand new keli, or it was only used in the past for cold things, then yato, you take to the mikveh, that's all you need. If lahagel, if it requires hagala, which is boiling out the keli, putting hot water, then yagel. And you remember, you need it to be bubbling. Is the bubbling, as the expression is, that takes the water out, exudes all the tray from inside the walls of the pot. Lehagel yagel, you do hagala. Lelaben beur, if let's say it requires burning out in the fire, then you laben beur. That's what you do. Hashapud, the spit, va'asklon, the grate, these become through heat of the fire. That's how it absorbed whatever the treif is. The melabnon beur, that's how you kasher through fire. Hasakin, when it comes to a knife, then shafa, all you do is you clean off, you scrape off any treif that's on it, and then the heat time, and then it is time. We'll see later in Gemara exactly what the method is. Third, the Gemara. Pardon me, learned the kula So, and everything, whether it's a brand new keli or whether it's a used keli, requires mikveh of 40 sa. How do you know that? Anything which it says the pasuk when after the war of Midian, he was giving them instructions how they can use the vessels that they conquered or that they plundered during that war. So he says as follows, that they confiscated. So he said the pasuk says, "Kol davar asher yaveh beish," anything that comes in the fire, then ta'avir beish. And big machlekes are showing him how to learn pshat in the Gemara, the Ramban, and the Chumash. We're learning like Rashi. So kol davar asher yaveh beish, anything that was used through fire, then ta'avir beish. That's how you kash it, using fire. And then it said in the pasuk vit tahoir. The reason why, is the fire, as we said before, the way it absorbed, that's how you pilot. And that causes a big machlekes. If, let's say, it doesn't reach 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius, but when you cooked it, it never was higher than 80 degrees. So can you say that's how you kasher it? Some say, yeah. But most say that you still need 212 or 100 so that it's not just kibboil kapote. In order to exude the taste or the flavors from inside the walls, you need the 212 Fahrenheit at 100 Celsius. And then there's a whole discussion, but not everywhere you need 100 degrees, depends where you are. The higher up you are, on mountain, let's say, there at 90 degrees, the water might boil. So maybe everything's relative. Anyway, discussion for another time. Says the Gemara, so they all require tefillah, because on the pasuk, after it says about kashering, it says vit tahoir. What's that the word vit tahoir for? Isn't that extra? So I tell you, there's another step involved, and that is you have to take your kalim and put them in the mikveh. It says in pasuk also in that same pasuk it says that anything fire is fire, and then it says ach. After it says the Torah, it says ach b'mei nida yitzchati. You should cleanse it in the same water that a nida goes and purifies itself. Shemei anis. I would have thought that so. Well, shetzorich hazor shlishi shvi. So I would have thought that maybe that you also have to cleanse yourself the 37th day from the paradum and all that. Tamaloimer it says ach. Cholok. Only thing that you have to do, ach is limiting, only you have to do is put it in a mikveh. So if so, what's the add to the word mainida? In Cain, if so, ma tamalay b'mainida. What do you tell me b'mainida? Mayim shenida tevelvet. All we're learning here is not the concept of tumah to make it Torah, but we're learning just like a nida has to go to mikveh that's 40 saw. I'm sorry, so the same thing, just like a mikveh. We were thought they tell you need 40 sa. So why do you need two psukim and then vit tahoir and achben may need yitzchak? Itzich we need it lemichte vit tahoir. We need both. Because with tahoir, it's a tahoir. I mean, with tahoir cold. I would have thought the slight a little bit of water is good enough. Because Ramada main need has to be 40 sa. I would have thought water covers it, good enough. Has to be main need. Because Ramada main need, I mean, I thought how to shemesh, you have to wait till sunset like a need. Because Ramada Torah la alta tells you what the Torah tell you la alta straight away. Now, even though we know that mahatayda you can purify needles and these golden little forks, it's only a little bit of water. That is regarding tumah, but not regarding this new kalim that you have to. Well, there you need may need a 40 sa. I feel the kalim even a brand new kalim. It's not a question of treif. No, this mikveh is to take it out of the domain of a goy and put it in the domain of a yid, which is like kedusha, as the Babashem explains in Kutas Chel. And therefore it's a separate law altogether. The laws of tefillas mikveh. Even though in Shulchan Aruch actually it's written right next to each other, Hagolah and Tefillas Kei. Maskot Rav has a question. So, if even a brand new keli, which means has nothing to do with being treif, so maybe a scissor also that you let's say cut wool. It's not used for food. It's not treif, but maybe you should have to also take it before you can use it because anything that a yid uses maybe it has to be kedusha. Clay suda amurim bepashi. Look at the pasha; it only discusses food that you eat, only pots and pans and utensils that you use for eating and cookware. That's all that matters. We're talking about if you bought it, you bought the kalim from a guy, okay. If you borrow from a guy, you don't have to. And Tais already points out, but if you borrow from a yid, since that yid already has an obligation to take it to the mikveh, even though if he didn't, and you borrowed it, you still have to make sure that it goes to mikveh before you can use it. Now, what happens if you used a cup or anything that's supposed to go to the mikveh and it wasn't, and someone put food inside it? Can you eat it? We'll see in a minute. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef Zovan Mana, he once bought a keli, a utensil, the marda. Marda is a mixture of dung and earth, and he made some kind of a dish out of it. So he thought you have to go to mikvah. He thought any utensil, any cookware, you have to put in the mikvah. That since we are learning everything from Ma'aser Midyan, and there was metal kalim, so only limited to metal. So that's it, only metal you have to table. So the Gemara, we expand that to hani kleis chochel, also glass. Because glass itself, if it breaks, you can mend it, you melt it down, and you form it again. Is what? It's clear matchas done. It's like metal, which doesn't really break, and therefore clear matchas. When it comes to Pesach, however, we are machmer that glass. Ashkenazim, Sfardim are extremely makel when it comes to glass. They say that smooth, well, like bully doesn't absorb. But when it comes to treif, we say when it comes to kashing for Pesach, that glass is not like metal. That glass is more like earthenware because it comes from sand, and therefore you cannot kasher on Pesach. And we don't kasher glass on Pesach unless it's a hefsed meruba, big loss, and certain conditions which you have to ask her of at the time. So everything needs tefillas kalim. There is actually just an interesting thought, that you have constantly get these questions about toasters, urns, things with plugs if they have to be tabled. Obviously, if you can, you can, but sometimes you can't because you'll ruin the entire electronics of the system. So there is some people want to be makel, and you always have to ask your own rav. That if within is that only a keli, which is the definition of a keli, is that it's mobile, to move it from place to place. If the only way a keli functions is by plugging it into the wall, someone argue it's considered mechuber, it's considered like it's attached, and therefore you can rely on that you don't have to table it. Others say you table whatever parts you can, especially the parts that come in contact with food, and leave the motor out of it. Anyway, and the plugs out of it. Setting about it further, what about kunya? Kunya is earthenware that is glazed with glass. You look at the beginning, which is earthenware, it doesn't have to be tabled. You look at now that it's glazed. And the loch is like the seifa, you look at it at the end, which is glazed with glass, and therefore you need tefillas kalim. Tracy says only if the glasses on top would come into contact with the food. Not if on the bottom, which does not come in contact with food, then you don't need to. As I told you, porcelain, others is a big machlekes whether you have to table it or not. Again, you have to ask your own. You ask the question, what mashkanta? If a guy gave you a mashkin, a security, holding some, let's say, of his vessel that you're allowed to use, but he gave it to you and he doesn't pay back the loan at a certain time, you can keep it. So during that interim period, it's still the guy's. Is it like borrowing and therefore you don't have to table it? Or do we say it's like you acquired it right now because there's a possibility you'll end up with it? How do we view it? And especially we had before that Yitzchak said that, that about there's koina mashkin, there's some ownership here. What happens? And so he said, my father, my father once gave him a silver cup. The at belay table it, the ish the he drank from it, belay dined it. I don't know why he tabled it. Is it because he holds a mashkantik is that a mashkin is much more than just borrowing it. A mashkin, you have certain ownership. And we had Yitzchak said that the koine, if you gave it to a woman for kedushin, and we had a big machlek that she's engaged. We had a big machlek if that's only talking about a pledge that he came in time of payment, and you couldn't pay, so you gave him the pledge, or even b'shas halvasai. Do we say that even the time that when it was lent and borrowed, the same thing? Common other places. Says the Gemara. Or imishum the chazil, he knew that this guy is not going to pay the loan, and the daitil is crazy, and the guy already intended to leave it by you, so therefore, definitely in that case, he's like the owner, and that's why he tables. I'm not sure. Talmud learned how you bought a vessel from a goy. So dvarim shaloim nishtamed when it's brand new. Then all you have to do is go to the mikveh and take it to the mikveh. They ain't taken, and they are kosher. The Varim, and since the Gemara uses the word the whole time, tired, so we see clearly this to do with Tumah and Tara, to do with Kedusha of a Bayit. But the Varim sheneshtamed ben my day tzayin. It was used for cold, could go in cases, cups, and containing the jug, tzulchis, and bottle madichin. All you have to do is rinse it out, madbilin. All you have to do is rinse it out, the madbilin, and it's good enough. You don't have to do anything more than that because it was used only for cold stuff. They ain't tied, and now they are kosher to be used again. Yeah. Again, you have to go to the mikveh after you rinse it out. You have to take it to the mikveh and use it for that, and then use it. but things that were used through cooked treif. Going, for example, hayodas, you have the pots and the kumkumin, and you have the kettles or chamin and these big, like urns. Magilan, all you have to do is you have to do hagola, and what, and then matbilan, you have to table it behind the Torah. Pesha says the order doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter whether you take it to the mikveh first and then you kasher, then mikveh. The reason why it doesn't matter is because the tefillah is totally unrelated to the kasher, and totally unrelated. And therefore, even though it's treif at the time, you can go ahead and table it and then afterwards. Some poskim would disagree with that. Said you go further, but things when you through fire, if you go in Hashapudin, spits, vasculites, and great malabdon, you have to then torch it, madbilan, and go to mikveh, they ain't toy, and they are toy. Now he says it. All of these, if you use them before you actually dipped it into the mikveh, or yagil, you didn't kasher it, or yalben, you didn't kasher it through hagolo, through libun. Tani chada aser, v'tani the one opinion says b'di'eved you cooked in a treifa pot, the food is treif, as we'll soon discuss, and the other one says b'di'eved you cooked in a treifa pot is mutter. Whether this argument also applies to layat. Some say that it's only referring to that you did not do it was a tray for pot and you didn't kasher the way you're meant to. But if you did not table it, even though it's a mitzvah to table it, the food itself does not become asr. But there's another opinion for Rishonim that says no, the food itself becomes asr as well, according to one brayso. And why? It's a gzeira d'Rabbanan that you should treat it properly, and we because we're scared that if you're going to see that if I don't go to take it to the mikveh, I can use it. If I don't kasher it, maybe I also can use it. You might make that leap. Says the Gemara, what's going on here? What's the machlekes the brayso whether the kalim that were not kasher if they're good or no good, if you can eat the food like kasher. So what's going on? One brayso follows the view Noisen, which we just had a short time ago. Noisen tam lev gam is also that if the taste is foul, it is usr. And Hakamandam and the following follows the view that says that Noisen tam legam is mutter. We learned a week ago more details, but the one opinion said that a foul taste is still usr, and that's why the b'di'eved, even a week later, the food is treif. And the other opinion says that a foul taste is mutter. So the obvious question is, if a foul, which we had the Gemara before as well, if a foul taste is mutter, then why kasher kelim at all? Says the Gemara, heichi, heichi dami. So sorry, you uli over the that what happens, if a keli goy that you're going to use and look zu treif. The osarach monothesis don't use it. Heichi mishkachla. What's that going on? When is that possible? Because according to the view that says a foul taste is mutter, then what do you have to kasher? And why do you have to kasher? The Torah acid a pot that is one day or within the day. Or tomorrow, within either 24 hours or overnight, that within that period the taste is still contributing in a positive way, and therefore you need to kasher it. But the following day you don't. The lav noiset talab gamu. So the more asks, it's not the first day. It's not much gam. You have to kasher. So the more asks, why kasher? Wait a day and then use it. So why kasher? Wait till tomorrow and then use it. Says the Gemara, that's midrabanan. Gzeira kedela she'ela bas yemem meshuk dela bas yemem. It's only midrabanan. And once it's more than 24 hours old, even though the taste might be putrid, that we have to kasher. Otherwise, you won't kasher within 24 hours either. The Ida and the other view that says that that it's usher forever. They say, and what's their proof? Maybe it's only the first day that you have to kasher. They say from the moment it's in the wall already is diminishing in value and in taste and everything else. And therefore, and since the Torah demands that you kasher, regardless how bad the taste is, you have to kasher. Okay, have a good day. This is the Gemara from Monday. See you tomorrow.